Hello everybody and welcome back to another wonderful episode of Guapish. As always, I am the king of history, Tanner, and today I am joined by a man from an alternate reality where Che Guevara was a homosexual, Nico.
It's all gone horribly wrong, people. It's all bad over here. But you can stop this reality from happening if you just subscribe to the Guapish podcast right now!
Fantastic. And a man who's contemplating a miracle on 34th Streeting himself, Jackson.
Guys, a huge friend of the channel just had a massive accomplishment. They just published Iron Lung onto YouTube. Go and check that out. Buy or rent it right now.
Yeah.
And finally joining us, a man from a reality where Markiplier, didn't make Iron Lung, Dylan.
Man, I didn't even have anything good for that. We had
I thought it was
Steel
that you killed
Kidney
yourself
instead.
is what was happening.
Yeah, no, in my reality, we have this thing called Steel Kidney. It was an interesting concept. I don't know if it really, I don't really know if the
It was a moon full of cum.
Yeah.
Oh my God. We absolutely should, like, you know, what is that one? Asylum? That movie studio that just makes horrible rip-offs of, like, blockbuster movies? We should make horrible rip-offs of indie movies.
Oh, no.
Skin him a ring, but something happens.
Yes, I will pilot that one. I'll take that.
There we go.
Skinamarink, but the lights are on now.
Oh, God.
Anyway, guys, we have gathered here today to do a writing challenge. I have challenged us all to come up with our own alternate history stories, a story in which you alter something in history.
Wow. Crazy.
Who wants to go first? Do we want to start with, like, the shortest story or the longest one?
Dude, let's do a reverse order this time. Let's start with the longest story, because, you know.
Okay. I believe mine is the longest story. Who would like to read mine?
This doesn't shock me. Dude, I don't think I've read any of your stories yet. I'll take it.
Sure. Alright, let me go ahead and share this to you.
Perfect. Tanner wrote, "The third term. In the aftermath of the Revolutionary War, General George Washington was appointed first president of the United States of America by unanimous vote. He was re-elected by another unanimous vote in 1793, and then won a third term in 1797. President Washington voluntarily elects to not run for a fourth term, establishing the long-running, although unofficial precedent of three-term presidencies. Important changes. Three-term presidencies result in presidents almost always winning a second term unless something disastrous happens. Presidents are much more closely tied to decades and take on a decidedly more monarchical tone. They also tend to be elected at younger ages. Washington is succeeded by fellow founding father and framer of the Constitution, Thomas Jefferson. President Jefferson takes on an even more expansionist attitude, following up on the Louisiana Purchase with declaring war on Britain in an attempt to capture Canadian territory. Thanks to the much shrewder and more aggressive leadership of Jefferson, along with the passage of his Steam Act of 1808, which bolstered a new industry for producing and propagating steam engines and steamboats, greatly buttressing the U.S. military's logistical capabilities. The war ends with the U.S. successfully laying claim to the British colonies in Canada. Anti-American colonists and Revolutionary War loyalists who had fled to Canada are ruthlessly persecuted, and most end up leaving the New World entirely. Important changes. Battle of New Orleans never happens. Colonel Andrew Jackson remains a relatively unknown military figure. Star-Spangled Banner never written. Yankee Doodle is the official national anthem. Nice. Slave revolts become more common due to the perception that there is nowhere to escape to on the continent. Seeing the success of the Canadian-American War, native tribes are more willing to assimilate into American society rather than attempt armed resistance. In 1813, President Jefferson was succeeded by John Quincy Adams, son of President Washington's Vice President John Adams. Jefferson's proactive stance on claiming territory and pushing technological advancements serves as a great inspiration for President Adams, who successfully lobbies Congress to pass his Great Transport Act of 1813, which created a national system of roads, railroads, and waterways, greatly increasing the connectedness of the colonies. America enjoys a decade of unprecedented economic growth thanks to these measures by President Adams. John Quincy Adams was succeeded in 1825 by naval commander William Bainbridge, running on a platform of establishing uncontested control over the Western Hemisphere's oceans, a stance that came to be known as the Bainbridge Doctrine. President Bainbridge had a widely uneventful presidency marked by a steady economy and continuing westward expansion. Towards the end of his first term, Eli Whitney Blake, son of inventor Eli Whitney, invents a steam-powered crop picker based on some speculative schematics left by his father. This machine quickly proliferates and plantation owners find that the machine is faster, more reliable, and in the long term cheaper than slave labor. Shortly after election to his second term, the nation is shocked by a news story of a plantation owner who, being unable to sell his slaves he had replaced with steam pickers, had euthanized his 50 slaves all at once. Northern abolitionists are sent into a frenzy at the wanton inhumanity and launch a massive campaign to immediately end slavery in America. Southern states are less opposed to the notion given that they have an acceptable replacement for the labor, but insist that the slaves be moved back to Africa, citing the massacres that were seen in the slave rebellions of Haiti as reason why the slaves could not be integrated into wider American society. President Bainbridge found himself caught in the middle of the debate. He agreed that ultimately slavery ought to be abolished, but was sympathetic to Southern concerns over reprisals by freed blacks. Prominent abolitionist David Walker, using his business and newspaper connections in Philadelphia, organized a march on Washington demanding that slavery be ended and freed slaves allowed to stay in America. Days later, Congress, with the approval of President Bainbridge, passed the End to Slavery Act of 1831, immediately declaring slavery illegal nationwide and granting official citizenship to all freed slaves. Southern states started organizing the mass transport of freed slaves to the North, stating that their concerns had not been sufficiently addressed in the quick debate and passage over the End to Slavery Act. Northern states, likewise, concerned with the impact of the sudden importation of the entire former slave population, send militias to shut down railways leading into the North. They are joined by Northern abolitionists who oppose the freed slaves being forcibly relocated like this. Stories then emerge of mass execution of freed slaves that couldn't be transported to the North, although Northern newspapers seem to take a far more drastic and sensationalist tone than is borne out by the facts as we know them today. Abolitionists, incensed by these stories, begin attacking slave transports and plantations. Southern states respond by mobilizing their national guards to repel the abolitionists, resulting in dozens of casualties. President Bainbridge nationalizes the northern militias and orders them to reopen the railways and allow southern states to send the freed slaves north. These actions enraged not just the abolitionists, but many ordinary northerners who were concerned about the impact of importing tens of thousands of newly freed slaves into their states. Bainbridge becomes the first president in U.S. history to lose a third-term election, and is succeeded by James Polk of Tennessee, running on a platform of renormalizing relations between northern and southern states. One of President Polk's first acts as president was signing into law the Freed Slave Settlement Act, which allotted pieces of land in the relatively sparsely populated American Canada to the freed slaves. The vast majority of freed slaves took up this offer and became what we now call the Black Canadians. President Polk also controversially had abolitionists who had participated in the raids and murders on plantations brought up on charges, and the leaders executed. This efficiently placated the southern states, and the successful relocation of the freed slaves helped him maintain a good reputation with the average northerner, although he was seen very negatively among the abolitionist community. Polk enjoyed a relatively stable rest of his first term and was re-elected in 1837. Early on in his second term, President Polk met with a delegation from Texas and announced that America would be admitting the Republic of Texas to the country and joining the Texan-Mexican War. While originally President Polk thought that conscription would be necessary, he found that an enormous amount of young American men decided to volunteer for the war, seeking excitement. The newly aligned Texan and American forces were easily able to repel the Mexican forces from Texas, and the decision was made by President Polk to aim for total United States control of the North American continent. In furtherance of this goal, Polk sent a delegation to France and Britain, levying them for financial and material assistance in the war in exchange for lasting treaties and trade agreements with the United States, as well as pointing out that should the U.S. be successful, then their rival empire, Spain, would no longer have holdings in South America just as them. Negotiations and the war dragged on until Polk won a third term in 1841, at which point both France and Britain agreed to the U.S. terms. Within 2 years, American forces swept through the entirety of Mexico before being stopped at Panama. Unbeknownst to the Americans, but Spain had been intentionally allowing America to take Mexico in order to massively fortify the Central American corridor, reasoning that they had their forces vainly fighting in Mexico that would have created the possibility of the Americans sweeping down into South America as well. Initially, American forces settled in for a siege of the Spanish positions, but it soon became evident that there was no realistic possibility of breaking through in a reasonable time frame. American delegates then negotiated and agreed to the Hispano-American Treaty, formally ceding the captured Spanish territories as well as their island holdings above the Panama line. These islands were allowed to become self-governing nations, and many Mexican subjects who did not want to live under Spanish rule, but also did not want to live under the English-speaking Americans, moved to these island nations, and allowing for the relocation of Spanish subjects to South America, should they wish, as well as allowing Spanish vessels to traverse the South Atlantic without interference from American vessels. Polk ends his term as arguably the most popular president in American history and is humorously referred to as El Presidente for the rest of his life. The sixth president of the United States was Spanish-American war veteran Zachary Taylor. President Taylor had a fairly uneventful presidency defined by the increasing settlement of the American continent. In 1857, Franklin Pierce is elected president. He signs into law the New Adams Act, which was aimed at massively improving the rail and road infrastructure of the western Mexican and Canadian provinces of the United States. The bill was overambitious in a minor spending crisis that ultimately soiled his shot at a third term. In 1865, Chester A. Arthur was elected on a platform of simple and good governance that allows the people of the country to make their own destiny. He also pushed to revolutionize the U.S. Postal Service to serve the entire continent. The remainder of the century is regarded as the era of no-haps, as it was a time of no major conflicts and the economy and nation was run relatively well. An amusing factoid of this era was the election of Grover Cleveland in 1873, who then lost his election bid to Benjamin Harrison in 1877, won against Harrison in 1881, making him the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms, lost his third term bid in 1885 to Theodore Roosevelt, and then came back and won a non-consecutive third term in 1889. Theodore Roosevelt returned to office in 1893 and served out the rest of the decade and became the second president to hold non-consecutive terms. For the opening of the new century, America elected Chester A. Arthur II on a hardcore immigration restriction platform. President Arthur passed the Pacific Exclusion Act, making all immigration across the Pacific Ocean illegal, as well as the Immigration Moratorium Act of 1899, which paused all immigration for a period of 10 years, with the exception of people who had already had American citizen relatives. He was killed in 1900 by a Chinese immigrant named Gung Go Bang. The assassination causes a constitutional crisis over how succession in the case of death is meant to be handled. Ultimately, the Supreme Court controversially rules that a new election is to be held. Woodrow Wilson was elected in 1900 on the explicit promise to deport all Chinese people from the country, which became known as the Dumpling Deportation. Wow. These moves ratchet up tensions with the Chinese Empire, which begins threatening war. Woodrow Wilson calls the Chinese Empire a I don't think I can say that word. Can I say that word?
Yeah, of course you can.
with the Chinese Empire, or calls the Chinese Empire and Emperor a chink. That's worse. And is quickly impeached and removed from office in 1903. Oh, this suddenly became a little more funny for some reason. This is less serious now. Anywho, elections are held while diplomats try and calm down tensions with China. William Howard Taft is elected as a steady hand and successfully negotiated for the Chinese to repatriate their citizens on the condition they are given fair compensation for property that cannot be brought over. President Taft serves out all 3 terms, ending in 1915, months after the beginning of World War I. In his farewell address, Taft cautions the American people that America's prosperity has been in large part due to her only fighting wars that are obviously beneficial, and that if he were to remain president, he would avoid the war to the greatest extent possible. There is heavy lobbying by his party to run for a 4th term, but Taft declines, stating if anyone is to overturn the precedent set by George Washington, it certainly would not be him. The American people seem to take his words to heart, electing the soft-spoken Calvin Coolidge, who never even hints at desiring to enter World War I. The lack of American involvement in World War I results in a negotiated settlement in 1918 that doesn't particularly favor any nation. As a result, the German monarchy remains in power. When communists and socialists, spurred on by success of the Bolshevik revolutions across Eastern Europe, attempt to overthrow the Kaiser, the World War I veterans and counter-revolutionaries coalescence into the Freikorps and crush leftist factions, reasserting the authority of the Hohenzollern dynasty. I think I said that name right. Hohenzollern. Italy, by contrast, is a successful communist revolution, installing Benito Mussolini as leader. The toll of the war on France resulted in the Socialist Party of France, Le Parti Socialiste de France, taking a supermajority of parliament seats. President Coolidge left office in 1927 amidst a growing national fear of communism. Herbert Hoover is elected next and is immediately faced with crisis when a series of mass labor strikes break out across the country, potentially backed by European socialist governments. Hoover mobilizes National Guards to quell strikes, but this only makes things worse. Domestic production of all kinds grinds to a halt as more and more laborers leave work and become embroiled in brawls with National Guard, police, and corporate mercenary forces. This drags on so long, the nation starts facing serious shortages on many goods, and President Hoover attempts to alleviate the situation with mass bailouts of major good producers. This backfires as the mass money printing, coupled with declining production, causes an aggressive inflationary spiral. The nation was plunged into the Great Depression, and in many cases, the labor strikes no longer mattered because there simply weren't jobs for the strikers to have been leaving. Hoover was heavily blamed for the Depression and became the first president in history to only serve 1 term. In 1931, Hoover was replaced by a new president, Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt III, son of previous President Theodore Roosevelt. Thanks to the reputation of his father as an anti-corporation fighter, President Roosevelt II carried some amount of respect in negotiations with labor representatives, despite himself being a fervent anti-communist. Roosevelt II passed the National Renewal Act, National Compensation Act, National Workers' Safety Act, and signed Executive Order TR-11. These acts, among other things, created mass work programs revitalizing national infrastructure, creating a federal minimum wage, creating minimum safety laws for workers, and establishing Labor Day as a federal holiday. These measures put America back on the slow road to recovery, and Roosevelt II won re-election in a landslide victory in 1935. Months after his victory, the United States of Soviet Russia... Sorry, that broke my brain for a second. Invades southern Germany with the goal of creating a bridge between communist Italy and them. Germany declares war on Russia and attempts to repel the invasion, but despite their superior training and armament, the German military is unable to overcome the massive number advantage of the Soviets. Germany, being now surrounded on 3 sides by the Soviets and their proxies, fears that the communist states plan on attacking them and conquering all of Europe. They call on their previous enemies, France and England, to help them. England pledges to help in the case of invasion, but the socialist-controlled France takes a stance on official neutrality. There are widespread debates that within America over whether we should get involved or not. Anti-communist beliefs were widespread, but at the time, America had not fought a war in almost a whole lifetime. President Roosevelt II, for his part, greatly desired to assist in the fight against communism, but was only able to go so far as removing tariffs from trade with Germany and England and imposing an embargo on the communist states of Europe without broad popular support. That all changed suddenly when there was a series of massive industrial sabotage events consisting of massive factory explosions. Federal investigators found that the sabotage had been caused by communist sympathizers, with some loose evidence that these attacks had been actually directed by the Soviets. When this news came out, the public was immediately galvanized against the Soviet Union and demanded that President Roosevelt II respond. In 1937, the United States declared war on the Soviet Union and their allies and began ramping up their war production. The Soviets, believing that they could win the war before America could get their military up and running, immediately invaded Germany. The German Free Corps had a had created a massive fortified line along Germany's southern and eastern borders, but it was regarded as a matter of time before the communists would manage to break through. Britain declared war on the Soviets as well. However, the USSR was able to successfully push for France to not allow British troops to travel through their territory, instead having to take the relatively more arduous route of landing troops in northern Germany before transporting them to the front. The war grinds on for 2 years before the United States is finally able to contribute, and contribute they did. The United States mobilized a fighting force of 10 million men and transported them across the Atlantic Ocean and staged the unprecedented simultaneous invasion of the entirety of the Mediterranean coast of the Soviet states. The American forces and the newly moralized German forces were able to push back the communists to the middle of Eastern Europe, where winter settled in 1939, and the fighting stalemates. The success of the initial push allows Roosevelt II to win this third term, and in 1940, America stuns the world by deploying another 10 million troops on the Pacific coast of communist China. The Soviets were completely taken off guard, having no idea the US was capable of such a massive mobilization, especially across the world's largest ocean. They attempted to repel this eastern invasion, but eventually realized it was futile, and their best move was to sue for peace. Peace negotiations eventually resulted in a pan-European treaty, which gave independence to the Soviet-controlled nations along Germany's border, as well as demanded war reparations be handed to Germany and Britain from the Soviet Union. America's big demand was for the USSR to provide the American government with a list of their known communist agents and sympathizers. This list was subsequently leaked to the American press and widely published, resulting in a brief period of widespread lynchings and violence against known communists. The war left huge chunks of Eastern and Central Europe in ruins, and the whole of the continent fell into a depression, resulting in a massive influx of immigrants to the United States. President Roosevelt II attempted to enforce control over this influx, but due to the fact that immigrants were coming from both the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean and had the option of landing in sparsely populated coastlines along Canada and Mexico, there was little hope of him being successful in this. Roosevelt II controversially ran for a fourth term on the platform of ensuring that communism is totally and irrevocably eliminated from his great nation. He handily won re-election and began implementing his anti-communist agenda. However, in the aftermath of the Second World War, also called the Global War on Communism, the ideology had naturally begun subsiding. I can't read, apparently. So the measures were largely performative. The American economy is roaring and things are good, so when Roosevelt II runs for a fifth term, he wins it fairly easily. However, in 1950, he is assassinated by a mentally ill man who believed George Washington's ghost had commanded him to kill President Roosevelt II. In the midst of its mourning, World War II veteran Dwight Eisenhower is elected that same year. He serves out all 3 terms, peaceably being seen by many as a kind, grandfatherly figure who had just kept the nation calm. In 1962, John F. Kennedy was elected the 21st President of the United States on a very inspirational platform that America was going to achieve more than any country in history, including his promise that an American man would walk on the moon within our lifetime. America enters a technological and cultural golden age. American film and music is enjoyed the world over, and American astronaut Neil Armstrong successfully walked on the moon in 1972 during President Kennedy's third term. In 1974, the 1974 election saw America elect Richard Nixon to the presidency, widely seen as a backlash to some of the excesses of America's cultural renaissance. Mere months after his election, the United Confederacy of Hispania launches a surprise invasion of America's southern border. Resentful of America's success, dominance over maritime trade routes, and the Spanish-American War concessions, Hispania aims to reclaim former Mexican territory and assert themselves as a regional power who could not be ignored. Nixon responds by immediately mobilizing the American military. However, the lack of experience post-World War II left American forces woefully underprepared to face the South American forces. The United States is eventually able to halt the advance at the Sierra Nevada mountain range while launching a massive naval offensive to prevent Hispania from being able to invade from anywhere else. As the war dragged on into his second term, Nixon commissioned the beginning of the Geronimo Project, a secret research project aimed at creating a nuclear bomb carried out from the U.S. naval base at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Nixon won his third term in 1982 in a closely contested election. In 1984, after a decade of intense fighting, Nixon made the ultimate decision to drop the nuclear bomb Big Fag on Sao Paulo, Brazil, causing 400,000 deaths, including most of the ruling elite of Hispania. The Confederacy almost immediately fell apart, with frontline soldiers leaving to go find their families by the hundreds. As South America fell into chaos, the United States reestablished the Panama Line and elected to sit back as the power vacuum sorted itself out. Nixon was succeeded by the kindly Jimmy Carter, who was elected on the promise that America would return to normalcy after what was now the longest war in its history. The major issue of the Carter presidency was occasional terror attacks by radical Hispania revanchists. There were no particular...
Revanchists.
Yeah, that. There were no particularly major attacks, and they only happened every 18 months on average, but even so, the American people decided they needed a more assertive leader, and in 1994 elected Hispania-American war veteran George Bush. President Bush massively escalated border security, as well as vetting off incoming immigrants from the former Hispania territories. However, on September 11, 2001, the 17th anniversary of the nuke being dropped on Sao Paulo, several passenger jets had been hijacked by Hispania terrorists, were crashed into the World Trade Center in New York City. President Bush immediately rallied the American people around a war on terror and began launching special operations incursions into ex-Hispania with the aims of dismantling terror networks. In 2006, John Kennedy Jr., son of former President John Kennedy, was elected, promising similar revitalization to that which his father had achieved. Times were peaceful, as the war on terror was largely out of sight, out of mind, and America did establish the beginnings of a permanent moon base. But by and large, President Kennedy II was seen as not having lived up to his promises, and so he lost his third term in bid in 2014 to Special Operations Commander Colin Powell, the first black Canadian to ever hold office. The Earth was then struck by a meteor in 2016 and everybody died. The end.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dylan. You did a great job.
They would not name things that, Tanner. They wouldn't do that.
They wouldn't name what things what.
You know exactly what he's talking about, buddy.
You think Richard Nixon would not name a nuclear bomb Big Fag?
No.
The most unrealistic
You're
part
insane.
of this is that it wasn't a big earthquake taking us out, it was a meteor. That's lame. It should have been a big
This
earthquake.
isn't
that killed us
2012,
all.
Jackson.
I want it
true,
to be.
So true.
We need to watch Deep Impact or Armageddon.
How did any of these events influence the meteor hitting us when it didn't in our own timeline?
Who can say? Really, it's just like, as I got to more recent times, I'm like, I don't know how to make this feel interesting and different, so I just ended the story, okay?
Okay.
Is that
I
okay
liked
with
it.
you?
I thought it was pretty fun.
No,
Jesus.
no. It doesn't make sense.
It was a very
This was
rich
like the
history.
type of... Yeah, this was good. I liked this. This was what I wanted to have something be like, but the problem is I just don't know enough, and I'm too lazy to go and do a lot of research to make something like this work in context, so I just didn't fucking do it.
Me and this Jackson guy are one and the same.
Yeah, I had a lot of random ideas, but I was like, I just don't know enough about this topic, and it would require just way too much fucking research for this, and I just don't care enough, so I didn't.
Yeah, I ran into a lot of me having to go I'm just gonna have to not think about how this affects this other thing,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Valid.
But yeah, glad you guys liked it, except for Nico. Son of a bitch.
He does it.
I thought it was still fun.
He didn't like
Oh,
apocalypse
okay, cool.
stories.
You don't think it's good, you just think it's fun. Yeah, we get it.
You know, it's some dumb fun. It's a nice little popcorn flick.
Oh, you think it's
Ouch.
dumb now?
It played well in my mind. It made quite the
kill this guy.
cinematic experience.
Christ.
Jackson, how long is yours?
Mine is about 2.66 repeating pages.
Okay. So mine is 5 pages. Who wants to take mine then?
I'll take yours. Why not?
Yay!
Perfect.
Okay, I'm sending it now. Here you go, check her out. It's an alternate history story.
All right. My name is Jackson, and I'm reading Nico's Alt History. The year is 1996. Absolutely nothing of note happens. There is no newest sensation sweeping the nation. Children across the states have found themselves with near limitless free time. Their minds have grown unoccupied and hands idle. No trading cards clutter the floor of classrooms. No handheld consoles glow under blankets past bedtime. There is a cultural vacuum in the United States. It is subtle at first, almost invisible, like a missing note in a song most people didn't realize they were waiting to hear. But absence has a way of shaping things. Dude, so many fucking paragraphs. Holy shit. You subdivided this bitch. Anyways.
Yeah, I was splitting it up like I pictured it being in one of those alternate history hub videos where it's like, and this is where he says this part, and then he says this part, and this thing shows up on screen. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Parents, relieved by the lack of a new obsession to monitor, loosen their grip. There are no rumors of playground scams, no moral panic. I need to fucking switch much monitor I'm reading this off of. No moral panic over fictional creatures, no late-night news segment warning of addiction. Instead, children drift. They gather in basements, in wooded backyards, in half-forgotten corners of suburbia, inventing their own rituals to fill the silence. What am I missing here? What the fuck happened in 1996?
Pokemon doesn't exist.
Okay.
Tanner got it. He clocked it
I
immediately.
never would have fucking guessed, dude. I never would have fucking guessed. I assume it was something like that because of the, like, trading cards thing.
Yeah.
That and the handheld games.
There's a lot of fucking handheld games. At first, it's harmless. Candles lit for atmosphere, chalk circles drawn because someone saw it in a movie, words spoken not for belief, but for the thrill of saying something that feels forbidden. The internet, still young and unfiltered, becomes their guide. Message boards and primitive websites host fragments of esoteric text, poorly translated, often misunderstood. It doesn't matter. The lack of structure is part of the appeal. By 1999, these scattered experiments begin to coalesce. Small groups form, then dissolve, then reform with new names and symbols. Teenagers, drawn by the aesthetic of rebellion rather than doctrine, begin identifying with what they loosely call Satanism. Not the organized philosophical strain outlined by figures like Anton LaVey, but something looser, more chaotic, shaped by half-digested ideas and pure validation. The early 2000s arrive, and with them, a nation already uneasy. When the September 11 attack occurs, the country searches for explanation, for something to blame. Attention doesn't fix solely outward, it turns inward as well. Dude, 9/11 still happens, even with no Pokemon. I can't believe it. What a bummer. Mm-hmm. News outlets, hungry for narratives, begin spotlighting the growing subculture among youth. Grainy footage of candlelit gatherings airs alongside speculation. Experts debate whether this new wave of neo-Satanism is a symptom of cultural drift or something more deliberate. Churches already grappling with declining attendance frame it as evidence of a spiritual void. Ironically, the attention fuels the movement. Teenagers who might, I don't know why I pronounce teenagers so weird. Teenagers who might have abandoned the aesthetic now lean into it. What began as imitation evolves into identity. By 2005, high schools across the country report organized groups openly identifying as Satanists. They don't hide in basements anymore. They meet in parking lots, in public parks, even in school clubs framed as philosophy societies. The rise of social media accelerates everything. These platforms become hubs for sharing symbols, rituals, and reinterpretations of doctrine. Influencers emerge, not selling merchandise tied to fictional creatures, but curated identities built around transgression, autonomy, and the rejection of traditional morality. The 2008 financial crisis marks another turning point. Disillusionment spreads among adults, not just teenagers. Institutions that once felt stable began to crack. For many, the large Satanism, reframed as individual empowerment and skepticism towards authority, starts to resonate beyond its original audience. By the mid-2000s, what people called Satanism had split into two very different worlds that only shared a name. On one side were the institutionalists, polished, media-trained, careful with language. They framed Satanism as philosophy, not provocation. Personal freedom, bodily autonomy, skepticism, and authority. They showed up in courtrooms, filed lawsuits, argued for equal representation. Their wins gave them legitimacy. Too many Americans, they were no longer shocking, just another belief system competing in the marketplace for ideas. On the other side, something uglier was forming. It didn't have a clean origin point. No single founder, no manifesto that everyone agreed on. It emerged from the same spaces that had once nurtured the early movement: forums, private groups, encrypted chats. But where the institutionalists refined and softened, this splinter group leaned into the rawest interpretation possible. They rejected symbolism, rejected metaphor. To them, Satan wasn't an idea, he was defiance made flesh, and defiance demanded action. They started calling themselves different things: the adversarial path, the black current, names that changed faster than anyone could track. Outsiders settled on one label: the adversarialists. At first they were dismissed as edgelords who never grew up, a loud minority clinging to theatrics that the broader movement had already outgrown. Even the institutionalist Satanist groups publicly distanced themselves, calling them a misinterpretation, an embarrassment. That dismissal didn't last. 2016 became the year the fracture turned visible. The 2016 United States presidential election was already shaping up to be volatile, but it was here the adversarialists find their opening. They don't align cleanly with any party. Instead, they inject chaos. Disinformation campaigns seeded not for political victory, but for destabilization. Organized harassment campaigns aimed at both candidates, not to support one, but to erode trust in the system itself. Their core belief is simple, almost childlike in its extremity. Systems deserve to collapse. Protests that year start to feel different, less focused, more volatile. Demonstrations that begin with clear demands fracture into competing factions mid-March. Clashes erupt not just between opposing sides, but within them. It became hard to tell who's there for what reason. By 2017 and 2018, isolated incidents escalate. Small acts of vandalism shift into coordinated disruptions. Power outages trace back to sabotage. Public monuments defaced, not just religious ones, but anything representing culture, structure, courts, banks, government buildings. Their messaging is inconsistent, deliberately so. Confusion is the point. Law enforcement struggles to categorize them. They don't behave like traditional extremist groups. No clear hierarchy, no central command, just clusters that form, act, and dissolve. Attempts to infiltrate them often fail because there's nothing stable to infiltrate. Meanwhile, the institutional Satanists find themselves in a losing battle for narrative control. Every time they appear on television to explain their philosophy, another incident tied to the adversarialists undermines them. The public stops distinguishing between the two. Then comes 2020 and the COVID-19 pandemic. Lockdowns create the perfect condition for the adversarialists to grow. Isolation pushes more people online, and their networks thrive in that environment. Fear and uncertainty make their worldview feel, to some, strangely coherent. If everything is already breaking, why not accelerate the process? Protests erupt across the country, some for legitimate causes, others co-opted, redirected, or quietly influenced. Adversarialist cells embedded themselves within larger movements, nudging them toward escalation. A peaceful demonstration turns into a riot faster than anyone can explain. A local grievance spirals into something national. In several cities, infrastructure becomes a target, not enough to cripple a country, but enough to create a constant hum of instability. Rolling blackouts, transportation delays, systems that almost work but not quite. Conspiracy theories explode, and adversarialists encourage all of them, not because they believe them, but because belief itself is irrelevant. Confusion is more useful than conviction. By the time the pandemic begins to ease, the United States doesn't feel the same. Satanism, as a broad cultural force, is still dominant, but now it carries a shadow it can't shake. The institutional side continues to push for recognition, for legitimacy, for stability, but they're always reacting, always explaining, always trying to distance themselves from something that refuses to be pinned down. Christianity, ironically, finds a strange second wind in pockets of the country, not as a dominant force, but as a reaction. Communities turn back to it as out of a desire for something solid. The numbers don't reverse, but the intensity does. Where it survives, it hardens. By 2026, the country exists in a kind of uneasy tension. On the surface, things function, elections happen, courts operate, daily life continues, but there's a constant sense that everything is a little more fragile than it should be. The institutional Satanists sit at the table now, legally recognized, culturally embedded. They speak the language of rights and philosophy, and part of the country listens. But somewhere beneath that, the adversarialists there are still there, shapeless, patient, and uninterested in recognition. They don't want a seat at the table, they want the table gone. Maybe things would have turned out different if that empty space in the 90s had been filled with something a little more harmless. Something small enough to fit in your pocket, but loud enough to keep a whole generation busy.
Interesting.
Dude, is this just because your mom thought Pokemon was the devil?
You know that there were many parents out there who thought that, and so I thought it'd be fun to be like, yeah, you know, they weren't
The trauma response
they weren't as
is real
hands-on
with the
about
story.
looking out for these Satanist symbols, and as a result, the kids turned to it.
I thought this would turn into some kind of D&D thing, but, you know, funny
What do you
that...
mean by that?
I've seen funny shows where they draw correlations between Satanists and people who play D&D.
Okay.
Don't worry about it, it's fine.
Very
Yes,
creative
I like it a
imagery.
lot. I think it's very creative and funny.
Thank you.
So Nico's is the next longest. Or not Nico's, Jackson.
Dude, I'll read Jackson's.
Okay.
Wait.
Yeah, Nico claimed mine already, so.
Yeah, I'll have to. Yeah, I read Jackson's, and then Nico will read Dylan's. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Can view. Be warned, audience. Mine is way fucking lazier than the last two. Temper your expectations.
Mine is also lazier than his, probably, so.
Dude, here we go. Alt History Collection. I couldn't think of one bigger topic, so I instead went with a bunch of smaller ideas that personally would have changed the course of my life. Okay. Collection number 1, buying a normal car. Back before I bought my first Miata, or EcoBoost Mustang, I was cross-shopping with a lot of different cars, some of them being very normal in comparison to the types I would end up actually buying. For example, a Tesla Model 3 or a brand new Honda Civic. If I did end up buying a very normal economy car as my first big car purchase, it may have waned me off of being a car enthusiast as much as I currently am. If I never felt a whole 300 horsepower, hot, not a crazy amount but enough to be exciting, then I may have never craved wanting more and upgraded to the Supra. Or buying the Miata would have never introduced me to the idea of driving a manual car for fun and engagement. Prior to the Miata, my only experience with manual was Blake's old Honda Civic, and to be honest, I was bad at it and not having a crazy good time. It was pretty stressful to learn it for me. I didn't pick it up quickly. I wouldn't be shocked if I did still end up purchasing some cool/fun car later down the line, but it wouldn't have been so soon as it was in this timeline or in such frequency. I probably would have been a lot more financially responsible, not have lost as much money in general, and probably would have avoided getting in 2 accidents. This also comes with the assumption that not getting into cars would have led me to not wanting to get into motorcycles as well, as they go rather hand in hand. In general, cars open me up to being much more of a risk taker, for better or for worse. I probably wouldn't have moved out to Texas so confidently without them either, and potentially just moved back in with my parents for a bit while figuring out what I wanted to do after leaving the condo. In general, I think I'd be a more boring person, but I would be in a better spot in life financially as a result. There's a chance I wouldn't even have been able to save up enough money to buy a house in Oregon. Or there's a chance I would have, or would even have. Yeah, I said that right the first time, whoops. Which was an unheard of option after losing tens of thousands throughout the years on random bullshit car-related decisions. Story number 2, getting arrested. I've done a few top speed runs in various cars of mine. The fastest I've ever driven personally was 165 miles per hour down the highway in Oregon in my Supra, and unsurprisingly, it would be over for me if I was caught, so let's run with that. I'm not the type of person to run from the police, and I was running a plate on all of my runs, so there wouldn't really be a point in trying to run from the cops anyways, especially driving towards a more populated area. So if I saw the lights at that speed, I probably would pull over to not dig myself a deeper hole. 165 miles per hour is well past felony speeding and could easily land me in jail and get my license revoked. Given it would be my first offense, I would assume my sentence would be pretty light, but I'd probably still be in local jail for probably a few months, and losing my license would be a huge blow. There's a decent chance those few months in jail would lose me my job, and I'd come out financially destitute with no easy option to get another easy job, as I, of course, don't have a license. They probably impound my car as well, on top of spending a ton of money while in jail and not earning any. I would probably be totally fucked. I would most certainly be in a decent amount of debt, probably would have had to pay a good chunk of a fine, and probably would be forced to move back in with the parents till I can figure it out. This would totally alter the course of my life. I'd like to assume I would hang up sports cars, or at the very least hang up driving them like a maniac. Knowing where the industry went for CS, there's a non-zero chance I'm just never able to break into the field again. This is of course coupled with the fact I have a felony and was in jail on my record. I'd probably end up just working at McMinimans for a few years, trying to get back on my feet and doing something with my life. It would take at a minimum getting my license back to consider moving out of my parents' place again, and at that point I'd probably be in my late 20s to early 30s working a shitty service job with no easy path out. It's hard to imagine my mental state if it got to this point, but I wouldn't be shocked if the stress of my failures, living with my insane parents, and lack of upward momentum in life rekindled my depression and made me kill myself somewhere along the line. Very introspective so far. Story 3, not letting her out. Day 1 of me owning and purchasing Lilac, she jumped out of my window because I left it open a crack, and she's a wily cat that wanted freedom from her kidnapper. If I had just kept that sucker closed, she never would have escaped. I wouldn't have felt the need to get Shimiko, and potentially this could have even spiraled to Nico not getting Mochi initially due to Lilac being kind of a lame cat and being a bummer to own by herself. Of course, Lilac is a great cat nowadays, but it took literal years for her to finally get comfortable around me. This, of course, would probably have dominoed into me not getting Themis as well. Realistically, Nico probably would still get a cat, but I think it would have been later on than when he got Mochi, so of course, it'd be a different cat than Mochi. I probably would get some other cat at a similar time as him, but the timeline would shift just enough that the cat household count would probably stop there. It's hard to quantify exactly how much my current cats add to my life in terms of direct value, so I don't think I would be a remarkably different person or anything. I just have less cats to deal with, and probably more money because damn, these fellers are expensive. And his final story, the good guys win. We're all now speaking German, and there's no mass swarms of asylum seekers in Europe. /S. Fantastic. Nice. I like it. I like that it's a very different angle from the rest of us.
Yeah, what a fun way of going about it.
Yeah, it's very focused and personal to you.
It's, yeah, I was gonna say, that's like coupled with it being lazy though. It's like, it's hard to do something like what you guys did because it's much more like a creative process. This one is just being introspective about my life, which is a lot easier to come up with ideas for.
Well, first thing, it's kind of funny you kind of I mean, it doesn't matter at this point, but you outed yourself with that first story. That shit's fucking crazy, dog.
I outed myself in what way?
Admitting that you were speeding down a highway in Oregon at 165 miles an hour.
That was my second story.
Whatever.
Also, he said that before.
Oh, well.
There's no cops watching this podcast.
I think, you don't know that. I think that, I still think this takes an interesting approach to the fact that, you know, you have to think of I don't think of branching paths very much, so maybe this is just big to me, but, like, even, like, the cat story, like, that takes some level of profound thought, in my opinion, just because, like, it could just be as simple as, yeah, I guess I wouldn't have more cats, but then you're also, like, thinking outside of that sphere of influence where, like, yeah, Nico probably wouldn't have Mochi, and, like, who knows what cats we'd own. I just like the fracturing timelines presented in stories. I think they're very cool to watch.
Yeah, the Lilac one I think was more interesting in concept to me, and then I wrote it down. Like, there really isn't a whole lot to say about this one. I think it was more entertaining to think that if I just closed my window that night, I would have had a completely different set of cats right now. Actually, that's kind of funny. Like, one minor decision would have totally changed that course.
I was gonna say, you know what they say about the butterfly effect? That shit is fucking real, and that shows in the cat story especially.
Yeah, it makes a butterfly out of you and me.
Yeah. There's a movie called Butterfly Effect. Is that on my list?
I hear it's not very good.
I
gotta say, Jackson, you were making fun of me for the way I structure my paragraphs. You're just these big fucking walls.
You should have seen Tanner's.
Yeah.
Like, Tanner's like last 2/3 of his was just fucking solid script. I was dying. Not gonna lie, you like following with your little cursor kind of helped me in a couple spots. But
listen, you know, I think I definitely would clean it up a bit, you know, format wise, but I was doing sort of, you know, standard formatting where like each paragraph is basically a different president.
Right, yeah, I kind of gathered that.
So yeah, on the two that cover like you know, the Hispania-America War and then World War II, those are much larger chunks than the rest of them.
Yeah, I handled that surprisingly well. I didn't slip up nearly as much as I thought I was going to.
Yeah, I agree. I think you did a good job. And speaking of a good job, let's...
Well, hang on a second, Jackson. I think you're not giving yourself enough credit for the getting arrested part. You know, like, at the time in which you would have gotten arrested there, we lived next to a bunch of little shops. Like, even if you didn't have a car, you could, like, walk to Safeway to, you know, push carts or something for a while.
The big implication there is that I wouldn't have... Like, I probably would have just, like, ruined myself from being in jail for a bit. I would have, like, I think I mentioned it in the paragraph that I probably would have had to move back with my parents.
Gotcha.
I mean, their baby would have been able to make it work. I don't know.
What do you think is the minimum amount of time you would have to be in a prison before you got raped?
What?
I don't want to think about that, man, so I don't know.
What the hell, man?
Okay, that's fair enough.
Why does it always come down to
I
that?
wonder if there's a... Because I think there's occasional, like, studies done on prison rape. I wonder if there's any studies that's like, what is the average amount of time it takes a person to be in prison before that happens to them?
Which of us do you think is the most rapeable in prison?
You.
Oh.
Well,
there's an argument to be made for Nico.
It's between you and Nico.
I'm not in the race, let's fucking go.
I really feel like you guys are underselling Dylan here.
What? Fuck you.
They called you Cuddles and Football, Dylan.
That's
what, do you
not
want
what
to get
they
raped,
called me.
huh?
No.
Hey, you trying to get raped,
Wasn't
buddy?
that... No. Wasn't this argument in one of the movies we watched this week? I feel
as
like...
long as we can all agree I'm the least rapeable.
I would
rape
imagine
bit
so.
was in Horrible Bosses, I'm pretty sure.
It was.
That's
yeah.
what it was. Very funny. Anyway.
Speaking of rape, let's hear Dylan's story.
That has nothing to do with my story. Nothing to do with it. Mine's very basic, bitch. I think it's fine, though. It probably has mistakes, but, you know, we'll get there when we get there.
Why is male rape always played for comedy? Why isn't it ever taken seriously?
I don't know.
Anyway, I'll start reading the story now, I guess.
Yeah, I probably should.
The premise is World War II. The breakdown. What if World War II wasn't so in favor of the Allied powers? The change. What if the attack on Pearl Harbor was slightly more devastating to America than what we experienced? The attack and bombing on Japan failed, and we never dropped the nuclear bombs. Italy and Japan never pulled out of the war and was a strong supporting backbone for Germany. The story itself. It all starts with the attack on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, and despite the fact that the Japanese kamikaze pilots faced the obvious results, the amount of ships that were still in service, the amount of American soldiers lost, and the level of military power that stemmed from Pearl Harbor were greatly changed. The manpower needed to make the alterations to the B-4 bombers to be able to pull off the long flight was not strong enough to get them to Japan. A lot of the planes, I'm assuming that's supposed to be planes?
It's planes. Whoops.
A lot of the planes ran out of fuel too soon, and the amount of planes left over that could still make it to land either did insufficient damage to the coastal cities. Japan... Wait. Was there supposed to be an or and something else that happened?
I don't remember. I wrote this in like half an hour.
Okay. Japan was also able to successfully fend off the attack, given that the military presence during the attack was a lot easier to handle. In addition to all this would also be less of a reason for Japan to pull out of the war and give them the opportunity to support Germany in their efforts in the war. Aside from Japan sticking around and supporting Germany in the war, Italy also doesn't end up surrendering halfway through the war. With this all being set into motion, the attrition suffered on both sides drove the countries further into despair and degradation, which is shown in society today. Because of the conflict in World War II, large portions of the US and the UK live in poverty. Mild conflicts still occur along the borders of Germany and Poland, faces a vicious cycle of breaking free from tyranny and being ruled by the dictatorship that reigns out of Germany. France at this point, as well, is a territory that is primarily owned by Germany, but the Allied powers still fight for the freedom of the country while trying to figure out how to do the same for Poland. Austria, because of this conflict, had buckled under the pressure and returned its land to Germany. Because of this, today Germany is a very self-sufficient power on its own and no longer needs help from the original Axis powers. Later in the war, Italy gave in to the attrition they were suffering, but the country is still experiencing the reeling backlash from the world and is not the tourist mogul it once was. Japan eventually did have the nuclear bombs dropped on them, but those events happened in the advanced years of the war. Japan, however, eventually recovered and was able to stabilize their economy thanks to the support of China. Why did China help them?
I don't know.
Anyway.
Dude, let's save our questions for the end.
Okay. Once they were stabilized, they broke away on their own and wanted to own up for their mistake they made in the war and the crippling blow they landed on America. With all the other world commingling and getting along, Germany remains to be a thorn in their collective sides. The end.
Wow.
Wow.
Dude, why did China support Japan?
Dude, I couldn't think of anybody else that would have... I honestly don't know. China made the most sense for some reason. I wasn't going to do Korea.
Are you aware that they were extremely hardcore enemies at the time and for hundreds of years before that? And to this day still are. Okay.
I was aware of that much, at least. That's kind of...
Japan did the rape of Nanking, and then China just kind of forgave them for that shit, I guess.
Yeah, of course. I don't know. I don't know too... I'm kind of like with Jackson. I don't know enough about history, and the ones that I know a little bit about is primarily the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and World War II, but like a lot of my World War II knowledge doesn't necessarily stem from history books, so... I took the...
What does that mean?
I took some video...
Like it stems from movies, you mean?
Movies and video games, other sources of media, so I decided to, try to use that creative side of it, but... Yeah,
if I'm being brutally honest, this probably could have used a bit of fact-checking, while you were writing
Why do we need fact-checking if we're writing an alternate history?
Well, for example, one major thing is that, like... You state at the end of the first sentence, Italy and Japan never pulled out of the war and was a strong supporting backbone for Germany. Japan fell after Germany did.
Oh, fair enough.
But I think the basic premise of, like, what if Pearl Harbor was worse, and then some of the fallout from that basically makes sense.
Yeah, my only, main idea with my alternate history is, World War II was still, a huge... tragedy on all fronts, but what if, because what I remember happening in World War II is eventually Germany just got less and less support because they were losing their fucking allies in the war, and so they lost because they got overpowered into the end of the war. So my whole thing was okay, so what if they didn't lose support, and then just the numbers on all sides were just tanking, and now the world is in destitute because the war carried on for too long. That was the general conception of the story.
Alrighty. Do you guys have any thoughts on Dylan's story?
I like the premise. I like World War II.
I like World War II.
I like World War II.
I can't wait for World War III.
I can't. Oh yeah, if World War II is so great, why'd they never make a third?
Dude, they're working on it right now.
Dude, as with our writing challenges, let's do a little vote for what our favorite story is. You can't vote for your own, and we're going to type them out that we don't subconsciously try and cause ties.
I have mine written out.
Dude, I have mine written out.
I'm assuming we're typing the names in order from best to worst, right?
No, just type the one you're voting for,
the
number
one you're
one.
voting
We're not
for?
doing a ranking here.
Ah, okay. I see.
Alrighty, guys. 3, 2, 1, go!
Holy
Shocking.
cow. Alright, I voted for Nico, and everyone else voted for mine.
Unsurprisingly, in fact.
Dude, this may just be my first writing challenge win, to be honest.
Dude, put it in the fucking website, Jackson. Do it, coward.
No.
Aw.
Jackson, can you, on the website, publish mine as a book?
Dude! Maybe we should have a section of the website where it's just our short stories. I think that'd be kick-ass.
That would be
Jackson,
kind of interesting.
can you make an entire Amazon publishing page for us so we can put all their stuff on?
No. That costs a lot of money, presumably.
We just make a anthology collection of all of our writing challenges in one book.
Yeah, it would make no sense because it'd just be so chaotic, but I think it'd be a great time.
I mean, it's a collection of short stories.
The Guapish anthology.
Like Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Yeah. Is that what those books are?
Yeah, they're just little short stories that are like nice. They make you feel nice and fuzzy inside.
Dude, I had heard the name of that series many a time. I had no idea that's what they are.
Yeah.
I propose the title of our book to be the Guapish Anthology, The 34 Rules.
I propose it be Sticky Goop for the Soul.
Sticky guap for the soul. Sticky wickets. Anyway, speaking of Guapish.
What a segue.
I can't wait for us to talk about movies that Guapish watched over on Guapish at the Movies.
Guapish at the Movies?
I have a very great friend in Rome called Biggus Dickus.
Jackson, what do we watch this week?
The Patreon pick, as requested by Slayed by Jay, thank you for the request, was the 2007 film Eastern Promises. And if you also want to get your movie into the raffle just like Slayed by Jay, go to guapish.com/Patreon or patreon.com/guapish for $1 a month, and you might get chosen. Speaking of chosen, Nico, I'm choosing you. Give us the plot synopsis.
For Eastern Promises. So Eastern Promises is a film about a woman. She works at a hospital, and some fucking prostitute, Russian, Ukrainian actually, lady comes in there. She's dying, but she gives birth to a little baby girl. And so our nurse, she's trying to figure out, where the family of this woman is so she can give the baby to her. But then she gets caught up in all this fucking Russian mobster business, which results in her, like, keeping the baby at the end or something. And, some people die.
Some people.
Fun fact, Viggo Mortensen decided to base his performance on Vladimir Putin. Which, to be honest, I can kind of see it.
Is that the chauffeur guy?
What?
Who's
Viggo
the
Mortensen is the main male character.
So the
Yes,
undercover guy.
He was a driver for the mafia.
Okay.
Bad fun fact. Guys!
Aw.
Ouch.
Damn.
This movie was, I'm gonna be honest, basically all the movies this week disappointed me. I was expecting a lot more out of them. This was fine. I'm giving it a B. Dylan, how about yourself?
I'm glad you said that. This may be the first week where me and Nico agree on more movies than not. Yeah, I thought this movie was fine. I enjoyed... Well, I'll get into the breakdown later. I gave it a B+.
Tanner, how about you?
I found this movie kind of boring. I'm at a C.
I am at a flat B.
Sounds about right.
Honestly,
I guess
I'm
I'm
kind of
the
tossing
hater.
up even between like a B and a B minus.
I was also
with
kind of
Tanner.
considered B-.
It's a very slow-paced drama. It feels like just not a lot of really anything happens.
That was my problem with giving the plot synopsis. I was like, yeah, this movie's kind of fucking long, but nothing really happens in it.
I agree with that.
there's certainly...
It's also not long. It's like an hour and a half, hour 40.
It feels long, though.
It does, because nothing's fucking happening. There are certainly, it's just like a slow-paced drama with not a lot of, big moments, I guess. There's some random moments where people get their throat slit, sorry. There was the big, scene with the bathhouse fight, or the sauna fight, which is cool. But, other than that, nothing really fucking happens, to be honest. It's, you'd have to get really invested in the world they're making here, or be really into the performances or something. But, I didn't really care that much about the mystery behind the kid or the setup with the mob infiltration or anything. Just nothing really worked that well for me. To be honest, I was just kind of fucking bored throughout most of my watching. It's a competently made movie. It's shot well, it's acted well. Genuinely, if you asked me if the fucking main character was a Russian dude, I would say yes, because I think he sold it pretty well for me. But just in terms of a writing standpoint, it really just didn't do anything for me.
I will say
I'd
the
agree.
biggest reaction this film got out of me was when the uncle or whatever was talking to his niece, our main character, and he was like, yeah, you had a miscarriage because you were dating a black guy, and it's like, oh my god,
that fucking part. That
Yeah. The uncle's a fucking mud shark hater, dude.
Yeah, good god.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree for the most part. Movie was very long. I mean, it wasn't even that long, I guess, because it was shy of 2 hours. But yeah, I kind of got to the end of it, and I was like, I feel like I saw a lot of things, but nothing happened really. And there was I felt like there was supposed to be action, but obviously there didn't have to be. But like, I don't know, this movie didn't hit a lot of highs. I don't really think it sank very low. I thought it was performed well, at least. But yeah, other than that, the story was kind of just flat for the most part. I almost was thinking, it's like, maybe I've seen this type of story too many times now, and maybe I'm trying to judge them based off of that, and just compared to those other movies, this one didn't quite do it as well. Not to say that the movie's bad, it just certainly didn't do a whole lot with what it presented, unfortunately. Like, all the crime busts and shit, just nothing. Like, we see it starting to happen, and then we don't see the end product, which kind of is just, like, kills it, I guess. But, yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, I did find the ending rather unsatisfying as well, unfortunately. Like,
yeah.
Nothing of consequence happens to the fucking rapist guy. Like, I mean, they have, like, implications behind the future of the events, but, like, we don't see it unless I'm completely fucking misremembering.
Yeah, and I mean, just the entire, like, final confrontation we had there, it was just kind of not much happened. That's just that's the idea behind the entire fucking movie, is that nothing happens. They he kidnaps the baby, he's gonna fucking drown it, and they're like, hey, don't do that. He's like, yeah, you're right, I shouldn't do that. It doesn't feel like a big deal.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the only caveat I'll give to that scene is I kind of was like, this baby is like his sister, and like in a way, I think that actor did a good job of portraying like this guy fighting with morality. Like, this is basically my baby sister. Like, I don't want to have to do this, but my dad says I have to protect him. So I kind of got that. But yeah, like, I agree. The turnaround in that scenario was way too quick. I think the events that unfolded there was like, that's not realistic at all. I figured somebody would have got pushed in the water or fucking stabbed, or somebody maybe would have died there. But yeah, no, it's just like, give me the baby. Oh, okay. And then they just fucking, and he like, his mood like flips too. Like, he's like, oh, everything's great now. Let's go get rid of my dad. Let's go. And they just fucking leave. And I'm like, this is not real.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys have been saying. It's pretty much the exact words I would use even. I guess I'm almost curious why you guys are like basically a rank higher than me, because like
it's still a well-acted movie and everything.
Yeah, genuinely, I think the best part of it was just watching the performances. Okay. I think our main guy is cool. I enjoyed watching him. Funnily enough, the thing that immediately stood out to me with this movie is that the main chick was the mom at the English Funny Games. I was like, this girl seems so familiar. Was she in Funny Games? And then she was. And I thought that was funny. But yeah, no, genuinely, I think the setting, and I think just the characters' performances are enough to like make it not feel like just abject schlock to me. And there were some good scenes too, like the aforementioned sauna scene, which I think was pretty good. It was like a realistic combat scene. I think was very well done. There's a bit of intrigue with the plot, but like I just don't really feel like it really went anywhere. So it certainly is like a slightly above average movie for me, but
okay,
not by a wide margin.
Yeah, I guess the big thing for me that's keeping me, in the C tier is just like, it just didn't grab me at all. Like I can be like, yeah, the performances are good, but like, it's not in service of anything interesting, I suppose. So I'm just like, it's like totally average to me in terms of like entertainment value.
I'd agree.
Yeah, I'd agree too. Well, folks, do we have any other thoughts on this one?
No.
No, not really.
Yeah, I think I'll go ahead and bump this down to a B-.
Upon further review, as per usual, because I kind of looked at like a sampling of certain movies in certain tiers and not the whole tier, I found I'd want to watch this movie less than certain other movies, so I think I'm actually going to bump mine all the way down to a B- instead.
This was supposed to be like the best movie this week. What the fuck happened?
What the fuck happened? I'll be sticking at my flat C. I feel good about that rank, to be honest.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, too bad it landed at a B- overall.
Shocking.
Man, Jay is gonna be so disappointed. He keeps requesting all these films that we watch, and he's like, oh man, I can't wait for that. It's a great movie. And then we just don't like any of them.
This one's a bummer too because it has pretty decent ratings.
Yeah.
So like, what did they see that we didn't?
This does make me curious what Jay's highest rated movie is, which
He needs to make a fucking letterbox. Jay, if you're watching this review, make a goddamn letterbox we need to see. Anyway, speaking of highly rated movies, we have another Monty Python movie this week that Dylan picked, that being the 1979 A Life of Brian.
I forgot I picked a movie this week. Yeah. So The Life of Brian. If you went to Sunday school and you learned about the life of Jesus, that doesn't matter because this is about Brian and he goes through his life like around the life of Jesus, I guess, and funny things, quite literally shenanigans happen, and he gets crucified at the end for his crimes and not his sins, the end.
Fun fact, what the fuck did I write down for this? Oh, in the scene where Brian is nude, they had to use a rubber band to make him look Jewish.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah, that's a good fun fact. I have an additional fun fact for this one that I thought you were going to go with, which is that the song they play at the end, like the Always Look on the Bright Side of Life or whatever, that song is the most played song in British funerals.
That's very funny.
They love it. They're big fans of that song.
That was an earworm for like a solid day for me, and I didn't even really enjoy it particularly much.
There you go. Speaking of enjoying the film, though, Dylan, what'd you give it?
I didn't like this nearly as much as the other Monty Python film. I gave this shit a C+.
Yeah, I think I have pretty much the exact same problems and pros as the other one. I just don't like this as much, so I'm giving it a B.
Huh.
I am with you guys generally. I think a lot of what worked in the previous one worked in this one as well, but it has similar problems. I definitely did like this one less than the other one. I gave this one a B+.
My problem is I really cannot tell to what extent me liking Monty Python slightly more is just because of nostalgia or me like being more familiar with it. I'd be interested to see how this one holds up on multiple viewings, but all this to say, it's basically on par with the Holy Grail for me personally. I maybe put it a little bit under, so I'm sitting at an A- or between an A- and a B+.
Ah, man. Yeah, so this is a comedy, and this is my type of comedy. This is the type of comedy I like, where it's just straight, they're cracking jokes. That's the entire premise of the movie. There is no, there is a wider narrative, but that's completely in service to the comedy they're trying to do. It's very dry British humor. I like it. I think it's funny. It's got a lot of scenes that just work well. There obviously are some jokes that I wasn't crazy about. One of the biggest ones they did was just, this is a parody on Jesus and him getting the big follower groups of people. There's a lot of stuff like that didn't work super well for me.
Yeah.
Like the fucking big group of people following him and stuff. I wasn't crazy about. There were some funny scenes though, like the whole fucking crowd of people trying to proclaim that they're gonna live by themselves and be individual people, and they're all fucking responding with the exact same lines, which I thought was kind of silly. The fucking crucifix scene, pretty funny. There's a lot of great scenes in it. The fucking stupid humor with Biggest Dickus.
Oh
the guy
my
with the speech
fucking
impediment.
god.
People talk about that like it's literally the peak of comedy. I did not give a fuck about it. I'm gonna be completely honest. They were easily my least favorite bits in the whole movie.
Yeah.
Which is funny. I didn't realize that was part of this movie. I've seen those before. I've seen plenty of people memeing it. But when I was reading Letterboxd reviews, that was half of what people were talking about was just the Biggest Dickus shit. Am I retarded? Is that incredibly funny, or am I just
No,
broken?
I thought it was
Because I found
insanely cringe, and I didn't like it
Well,
at
you
all.
see, Jackson, it kind of sounds similar to them saying big dick.
No fucking way. Did I miss the joke?
It completely recontextualizes the scene.
Oh my god! Yeah, no. I would, yeah, I mean, it's a comedy. I would say, generally speaking, I was having a good time with it throughout the entirety of it. I thought it was a funny movie. Like always with comedies, not everything stuck. I think there was more jokes I thought were funny than jokes I didn't think were funny. So it all worked. Another standout joke for me. When they're gonna go raid the house to look for the fucking, Judea Alliance, whatever they're fucking called. And a massive swarm of Roman troops go in, and then they all leave. And then when they come out of their hiding spot, they're literally hiding behind lamps and shit. And it's That's a good fucking bit. They do it like 3 times. I think it worked every single fucking time, you know? There's a lot of random stuff like that. They were clever with their jokes. I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, as Jackson said, the film is just like built around jokes, basically. And each scene is just one joke, pretty much. And as a result, if you don't like one of the jokes, that shit's just gonna go on for a few minutes and you kind of just gotta stew in it, which makes them really fucking drag sometimes. As Jackson said, the biggest dick is shit. Just anything involving Pilot was so fucking dumb and I hated it.
They gave him a lisp.
The fucking crowd. Yeah, he talks kind of funny, doesn't he? And the crowd following Brian, calling him the Messiah, just whatever, who fucking cares? But for the most part, those were the only ones I wasn't a huge fan of. Outside of that, there were some great parts, like the fucking when Brian is like writing like Romans go home or whatever the fuck, and they're like giving him a lesson on grammar with a fucking sword to his throat. That was great. I was a big fan of that. Them talking to that one dude who's like, I want to be a woman though, and they're like, you don't have a womb, why are we fighting for your rights to have children that you can't have or whatever. My favorite part though, Brian giving like his first sermon about the fucking birds or whatever, like, oh, he's going after the flowers now. That part fucking killed me.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, my favorite jokes were also when it was him doing a twist on, like, you know, stuff Jesus said or whatever. I probably laughed the most when they're watching Jesus's sermon and they're mishearing it, and he's like, he said, "Blessed are the cheesemakers." I'm like, oh, good for them.
yeah.
Or I forget what the exact line was, but it was like, oh, he said, "Blessed are the meek," and the woman is like, oh, well, they've had such a hard time, good for them, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, silly little stuff like that. I agree, there's, like, lots of stupid stuff, like Biggest Dickus, and, I don't know, you guys like the wacky alien scene?
No, that shit was retarded.
That shit came out of fucking nowhere. Yeah. I mean, I think in concept it's kind of funny to just throw some total non sequitur in there, but I don't think it was really that funny, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I really like the ending. Like, just the fucking dozens of people being crucified and they're doing their happy little song. I do really like that. It got me a decent bit, but yeah, it's a comedy movie and I found it funny.
Dylan, how'd you think of it? Were you a big fan? You like this one?
No, I did not like this movie. It was fine. I found basically none of it funny.
Oof.
I don't know if I'd say it was mildly offensive, but I don't know what else I'd say here.
You would be one of those people that were fucking protesting this movie when it came out for being, like, blasphemous?
Yeah,
is that where you
I mean,
are
I don't
at?
know if I'd go that far, but certainly, like, I didn't find the jokes that funny. A lot of the bits, I mean, yeah, I guess the Jackson saying the part where the Romans are going in and out of the place and people are just hiding in the most abstract, you know, stupid places was kind of funny, I guess. The ending was fine, I suppose. It's just, I feel like a lot of the jokes either went over my head or I didn't find them funny. So, a comedy movie that's not funny just fails to land well, I suppose. Maybe I took this movie too seriously, I don't know. Because, I don't know, to me at least, I felt like this movie was missing aspects that Monty Python's The Holy Grail had. But hearing you guys say it kept some of the same aspects was strange to me. So I guess I must have missed something. Maybe it's just because I take certain matters more seriously than not. And there are just some cases where I take things too seriously and I miss the point in case that wasn't already obvious in our long-running history of Guapish anything. I don't think it was a bad movie. I'm not saying I wouldn't watch it again. I just didn't find it funny. Maybe I need another run-through to, like, you know, put it in perspective and then see if I find it funny. It's just, like, in the moment, I didn't find it very entertaining to watch, personally.
But, you know, fair enough, I suppose.
Maybe in an alternate history, I would have enjoyed this movie. Somebody should write an alternate history of me liking Monty Python, or The Life of Brian.
There we go.
I do an alternate history where Jesus was half Italian instead of half Jewish.
Yeah.
That's another one of those jokes that goes right over my head, oh no.
Well, guys, do you have any further thoughts on Monty Python's Life of Brian?
No.
I will say, okay, I guess one thing. I like that Monty Python, even that they are these really, silly, absurdist movies, they put actual effort into, like, their sets. Well, not even just their sets, like, they're in actual fucking environments. They're actually outdoors and it's like a real movie, I appreciate that from the whole, the whole franchise, I guess. Not quite the word I want, but...
I would agree with that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sticking with my B.
Same. Or I'm sticking with my B+.
In the most polite way I can mean, I will stick with my C+. I don't hate this movie, despite it being C+.
Despite it
You know
being
what?
bad.
I'll go with the higher of my two and put it on par with Holy Grail at an A-.
Okay.
And it lands at a B overall. Whoa!
Whoa!
Holy smokes.
And of course, we have the last movie we watched this week, which was my pick, that being the 1978 film The Deer Hunter, which is about a group of guys that get drafted, presumably, into Vietnam. And
No,
then
they volunteered.
They volunteered, crazy guys. And then they, hilarity ensues in Vietnam, and then the final act is, what changes about them from experiencing Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact, the script for this originally started out as a screenplay just about Russian roulette gambling in Las Vegas, and the director just kind of decided to add Vietnam to it.
That's
That's
a strange
very
decision,
different.
but it's funny.
I also feel like you can kind of tell as well. You're like, this feels like it revolves around the Russian roulette a lot more than any of the Vietnam stuff.
Yeah, it was a really weird weight in the movie.
Yeah.
I'll say that was a good fun fact, Tanner. What'd you give it?
Thank you. I am currently sitting at an A- with a question mark. I'm not totally sure how I feel about this movie.
Okay, Dylan, how about yourself?
For the first time in a while, I'm legitimately floating between two rankings myself. Not nearly as high as Tanner. I'm floating between a C+ and a B- for this movie.
Whoa. Jackson.
I'm like in a pretty wide range. I'm like between like B and A-, I'd say.
Whoa. Man, I gave this shit a D. I fucking hated it. Fuck this movie. I'm kidding. I'm giving it another B. I'm all B's this week.
Well, my original assertion. I'm just gonna get this out of the way. You guys can fucking haze me for this all you want. I pretty much only found them, like, being jovial and living their lives, like, in the wedding scenes and, like, the hunting scenes. I found that the most entertaining part of the movie. I when we got into the Vietnam part, I was like, okay, this could be pretty cool. And then, like, it just very quickly downward spiraled for me. I could not give... I couldn't care less about the rest of the movie at that point. It just got so boring and so slow, and there's just this weird drama about the whole thing. And I think it was performed rather well, but it's just like... the movie spread itself very thin, in my opinion, and I think, like I'd said before, the addition of the Russian roulette being such a centralized focus in so much of it was strange, and it felt like the movie was trying to come across in different tones, and I feel like with it not finding its footing and, establishing a single tone, it kind of made it chaotic, but in a slow way. I kind of remembered thinking when they came back and returned from the war, I remember saying out loud, I was like, oh, I wonder if they're gonna make this movie a fucking palindrome. That'd be pretty funny. And they didn't, unfortunately. I think that would have been a cool thing to see. But, I thought it was fine, albeit boring and lacking tone and, structure in some parts of the movie.
I guess I'll go here. So I think it makes a lot of sense that 3 out of 4 of us are kind of unsure about our ranks, because this is it's a complex movie. It is thoughtful. It's interesting. I think it's fairly nuanced, I'd say, and but I think the big thing that I don't want to say hurts it, but I can't think of a better way of expressing it. The big hurdle to viewing this as a perfect movie
It's
for
really
me.
fucking long.
It is a slow burn.
Yes,
It
sir.
is the slowest burn I've ever seen. It takes 40 minutes to get to Vietnam, maybe? How
Yeah.
long is the fucking, like,
It's like an hour or
establishing-
something like that. It's a third of the film.
It's insane, and like I like that stuff. I really like our characters. I think they do a great job of establishing the rapport between them as friends and making them seem like, yeah, these are dudes that like I can see as, you know, real people, not just like characters in the movie. Mm-hmm. I think I think this movie probably could have. As I was watching this part, I was thinking to myself, okay, this is very long. Is there a reasonable place here where we could say you actually start the movie here and it still works? And I'm going to be honest, I think once they are driving after the wedding into the woods to go hunting, I'm like, you could probably start the movie here and it still works, because there's still... It's not exposition, but they're saying things where like, okay, this is a group of friends, they're on a hunting trip after a wedding, some of them are going to Vietnam, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, so you could cut out probably like 40 minutes of this movie and it would still make sense. But I do ultimately really like it. I think it's very interesting. I think one thing I like is that a lot of these Vietnam War movies, they are bleak specifically because they're I won't say propagandizing, but they want you to be like, okay, Vietnam bad. And this one does do that to an extent, but it leaves off on a hopeful note, I'd say. A somber yet hopeful note. I love the ending scene in the bar when they start singing America the Beautiful. I think that is a really touching scene and wraps up this movie very well. And a lot of the themes it is wrestling with war and the effect it has on people and nihilism and death and all of this kind of stuff is really interesting. It's just, it is a lot that it is pushing at you constantly. And so it's a bit discombobulating perhaps to really think through all this stuff. And one minor thing I'll shout out. Shout out fucking Michael for not sleeping with Nick's wife when he came home from the war until after Nick died. Michael is my fucking goat. Love that guy.
Yeah. I think that's the point.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Tanner said. This is a hard movie to analyze because I think the thrust of what they're trying to say works well for me, and I think what they're trying to do works, and I think the pace in which they take it is good for itself. But it is just a lot, and it certainly loses itself at moments because of its length and how long it takes to like build to things. Interesting. I think it's interesting to hear that Dylan thinks the wedding scene specifically, or like the whole preamble before they get to Vietnam, was the interesting part, because I feel like that's the opposite of what most people's opinion is. I think it's kind of interesting. But yeah, no, I like our characters. I think it's good that we get a lot of time with them, because then it makes us feel more deeply to their actual struggles within Vietnam and then post, obviously. It makes a lot of the scenes feel a lot more impactful when they're in these really dire circumstances. And I found it entertaining. I don't think I was ever like really bored at any moment, but I can't not like acknowledge it as a flaw. Like I enjoyed watching the movie. There's a lot of scenes that really like worked on me. There's some scenes that certainly got me very emotional. And you know, I thought it was a well-made movie. It was very well acted. Like Tanner said, it's like easy to even like put yourself in the shoes of these characters. Like if we were, you know, back in the time of the Vietnam War, you know, I could see us being this type of group of guys just fucking around, not knowing what we're getting ourselves into. And it's fucking bleak, but I think they handle it well. Like Tanner said, I enjoyed the ending a lot. It's just a solid movie, you know. It's a solid movie. I would say I was disappointed by it a bit because people do talk extremely highly of it, and I do think it's a good movie. But like I think I certainly was still expecting it a bit more than what I got. But that's neither here nor there. I think I still enjoyed my time with it.
Yeah, I want to say some things when Nico wraps up.
I'm actually with Dylan here, and that I enjoy the shit that's going on like back in their hometown a lot more than I liked what was happening in Vietnam.
Okay. So And yeah, I mean, the thing with me is when we go into movies like this, I do value the camaraderie and like the character connection and the character building. And like Tanner was saying, you could just very easily believe this is a group of guys that just hangs out and fucks around. And like, at least for me personally, I have this weird like nostalgia for like, man, it'd be really cool to like exist in that time period. Now, obviously, there's the confines of like war being a premise that people are faced with. But for me, I always thought the idea of like living in that time would be kind of cool. Just fucking around, driving around, doing shit, running around, especially at night. So when it comes to seeing people doing that in these movies, it's very fun to watch. I will say one thing too, it did this more so towards the beginning. It kind of did it sprinkled out throughout the rest of the movie. Sometimes I feel like there were just random jumps in the movie, just where it's like, oh, we're here now, by the way. And you're like, okay, well, like one scene that sticks out in particular is like when they're first in Vietnam, we find Michael, he's like in a village and he's like lying on the ground, and then, it's shit happens and the helicopter flies in. And then the next thing we know, they're like in, some like Vietnamese imprisonment like shack place. And so it was all that jumping. Like we went from them being home to them being in Vietnam, and then being in Vietnam somewhere else with no context. Like obviously we can fill it with context, we know what's happening, and it did that a couple times towards the end. I don't think it was quite as noticeable, and I get the ending they were going for. I wanted the ending to land with me better. I found it touching, but like to me, I feel like it ended too abruptly. I feel like it could have used just a little bit more something to really land it. But that's probably just me. I didn't dislike this movie, but I agree with the sentiment of everybody here, where it's just like there are just certain things that drag on too long. I think certainly all the Russian roulette things that were happening probably could have done without. I think some of the random drawn out nonsense that was happening in Vietnam, we could have done without. All like the meandering we did when Michael returns to town, just fucking around doing shit, probably could have trimmed up that a little bit. But overall, I think it was I think it's like Jackson was saying, it's like a thought-provoking movie. There's a lot to it that needs to be analyzed. And I think in a way this movie kind of connects with a bunch of different people, which is probably why in this aspect of us reviewing it, certain parts of the movie impact us more than other things, but we can all kind of collectively understand where we lie in the scope of, the movie.
Dude, I was just thinking, is it supposed to be, like, I won't say a joke, but, like, is there a reason why our characters are all Russian Americans and they're playing Russian roulette? Are we supposed to read something into that? Is that supposed to be, like, a thematic point of the movie?
I don't particularly think so, no.
Okay.
Yeah. I kind of read it as, like, I kind of read it as like it was a weird obsession they had in Vietnam for some reason, and it just so happened to align that they were Russian. I didn't really think about it too much more than that.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. Fun fact about that Russian roulette stuff, they do that in Always Sunny in Philadelphia as well. They have the red headbands on and everything.
Oh.
I didn't realize that was
I
didn't realize that was a reference to this film.
Yeah. It does seem oddly specific, so it makes sense it's a reference to this.
Yeah. I was kind of bummed out that I didn't cry at the end of this film, though. Like when, fucking, who is it? Christopher Walken or whatever? When he kills
Nick.
himself at the end of the movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Nick. When he kills himself, I was like, fuck, this is getting me damn well on the edge. I'm so fucking close. This is so goddamn sad. But I just didn't cry, unfortunately. Which is a
trying
bummer.
to think of, in that moment, what would have been more impactful and emotional? Would it have been one of them dying, like our main guy, like all the struggle and heartache, and him being the guy, him dying there in the Russian roulette game against Nick, and Nick snapping to his senses, or Nick dying and then Michael losing a friend, or he gets through to him and they go home? I kind of put it in my head. I knew Nick was probably gonna die here, but my immediate, like, it's a very close race to where they both just go home and they fix Nick. That was probably a more contentious part of the movie for me, but I guess I could say the expected happened. So
Yeah, I mean, that scene was just so tense, because it's like one of them is gonna presumably die here. But it's like, if he does somehow manage to convince him, like, come on home, Nick, come on, you don't have to be here anymore. It's like, well, what are the ramifications of that gonna be? Are they gonna have to like, fucking run out of here and get chased by all these dudes or some shit like that? But
yeah,
no, he just fucking tombs himself.
I just wish, this is like, I suppose this isn't like a physical jump of the movie. I just wish we would have gotten a little more context behind Nick's shift. Because I get it, war does shit to people. It's not surprising to see or to hear it. I just feel like, I don't want to say his shift was random, but I want more context behind it. It was like, I feel like the change happened when they were in the helicopter after being rescued from the fucking imprisonment place. But, like, we kind of just see him in the hospital, and he can't remember things, and that's kind of it. And then we flash forward, and he's some dude who's really into playing Russian roulette, making a ton of money, but he's still sending money to, like, his friend who, for whatever reason, that he remembers but doesn't remember Michael. It's a confusing collection of circumstances, just given what I've explained. I wish they just made that a little more clear. I think it would have landed better, personally.
I think it's just supposed to be, he has PTSD and has kind of, like, lost his will to live. But he's lost it in a way where, like, he's not gonna go out of his way to just kill himself, but he is, it's just like Bella in Twilight New Moon, where she becomes an adrenaline junkie.
Yeah,
I kind of came to the conclusion of that. It's not my favorite version of this story, but it's I suppose it's the one I'm gonna have to go with.
Well, folks, we have much else to say about the deer hunter.
Dude, there were only like 2 deer in this movie. What the fuck's up with that?
Yeah,
what an interesting movie.
Why would they put up with their friend just like waving a gun around in front of him, like aiming at him? What's up with
Dude,
that?
it was the 70s.
Yeah.
I like the part at the end where he's like, it's not even loaded! And he fucking shoots the ceiling. It's just like, dude, you didn't know there was a bullet in the chamber. Let's be fucking real. You just got lucky.
Well, guys, I think I'm gonna be sticking at my B.
I was about to say.
Hey,
Bro almost fell for his own bit.
The bit was
That's
real,
crazy.
yeah.
I think I'm gonna just go in the middle of my ranks at a B+. I could certainly see myself being introspective about this movie more and maybe raising it, but I don't know. I certainly think it would need to be trimmed up a bit for me to want to put in the A tier somewhere.
Mm-hmm. I will give this movie the benefit of the doubt, because I think I'm a little more positive on this movie than I let on, and hearing you guys talk about it just brought things to light. This movie is certainly a head case, a thinker, as it were. I'll give it a B- though. So.
I agree with Jackson. This is definitely something I'm going to be thinking over time. I'll stick at my A- for now, but yeah, this is a very intense, I'll say, film to, like, mull over.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, it was the first one I watched this week, and I had all week to think about it, and I still couldn't really decide where I wanted to put it.
That's fair enough, man. There's a lot to digest.
And it lands at a B+ overall, which is funny, because that means we reviewed a B- and then a B and then a B+, but we got the whole B category this week.
The whole spectrum.
The pile grows.
We did, the pile's A- now.
I know, but the original pile's growing.
The original pile fucking blows ass. The original pile can kiss my ass. Where are you guys picking?
I'm gonna go ahead and pick Being John Malkovich.
Oh, I've heard the name of this movie a lot.
I have not.
I don't know anything about it.
I think everyone's John Malkovich.
I think that's the case, yes. I am going to be choosing Gurren Lagann, The Lights in the Sky Are Stars, or whatever that one's called.
Is this
Holy
the sequel?
smokes. Yeah, it's the second Gurren Lagann movie.
No, it's completely unrelated to the first one, Dylan.
Dude, it could be non-canon, I'd believe you. Dude, I think I'm gonna dislike this movie.
Well, don't go into it
You
expecting
just
to dislike it. What are you doing?
Dude, I gave the other one like a D-.
And we also have the Patreon pick this week, which was Hush, the 2016 film requested by Tutbot. Thank you for the request.
Whoa! I've heard of this movie, I think. And if you too would like to request a film just like our patron Tutbot did, then Dylan is going to tell us about how you can do that.
Okay, for $1 a month, you see, you get access to the Discord, which gets you 500 slime coins for the slime bot. It also gets you access to talking to us, because you can't do so otherwise, and who would want to waste that opportunity? You also get to request topics. We have yet to see one, so maybe you could be the first. You get to request movies, just like, I don't remember, Slayed by Jay did, I think is his Patreon name. You also get access to the pre-guap. We had a pretty good one today. I was very happy with that one. You also get access to the episode whenever it becomes available, and aside from that, you get your name read out at the end of every episode. Thank you very much to Irish Wristwatch. Oh my lucky stars. I'm not reading that one. Jesus Christ, man.
That's our fucking patron who pays us money.
Slayed by Jay, Blake,
You
Netagant, Lava Skin, Top Ramen Man. If Jennifer were my boss, we can't read this.
What are these patrons doing? Oh my god.
We
sons of bitches,
we
all
do
read
some
their names.
bad sex things to her, and all the rest of the before she
Shut
even
the
had the
fuck
chance
up.
to harass me.
I'm gonna read the name, you
Tutbot,
son
Lucas
of a bitch.
Ledette, Hunter, and Jacob Edwards. Thank you all for your dollars. Maybe make it so we can read the names without getting canceled next time.
Thank you all very much. If you enjoyed, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell. We'll be seeing you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.